Hello, and welcome to mentorDINO. I'm your host, Caitlin Rossier. I am an architect and founder of mentorDINO. I firmly believe that architecture, engineering, and construction professionals can achieve true success by embracing human skills as their guiding principle. So each week, I interview amazing professionals in and around the AEC industry as a way to share stories, inspiration, and advice for others finding their own unique career path. Thank you to all of our current subscribers, and if you're new, we'd love to have you join our community. So if you like this episode, please do me a favor and hit subscribe, like, or leave a comment below. It really helps others be able to discover this resource and support them on their own career journey. So let's dive in. I really hope you enjoy this conversation. Welcome to the mentorDINO podcast. I would like to welcome Jenny Peysin, principal of Jenny Peysin Architecture in New York City. Thank you so much, Jenny, for taking the time to speak with me today.
Thanks for having me, Caitlin.
And so I always start out with my loaded questions. So if you mind introducing yourself, and can you tell us a little bit about your experience and journey so far in your career in education?
Sure. Thanks again for having me. I am Jenny Peysin. I live in Brooklyn, New York. I was born in Ukraine and came to Brooklyn when I was 7 years old. And kind of growing up, always had an interest in doing fine art and ended up studying art in LaGuardia High School in Manhattan. So I was kind of at a pretty early age exposed to a lot of New York City arts and culture and whatnot. And at that point, and it actually was in high school, that my photography teacher was like, my husband is an architect and I can kind of imagine you like being interested in doing that kind of work. And so she got me an internship in like 11th grade at an architecture firm, which kind of set me on the course that, obviously I had no idea what I was getting into, but I ended up applying to architecture school and kind of learning to really enjoy it. And so I went to Cornell in upstate New York in Ithaca, came back to Brooklyn right after school, and it was 2009. So like there was just no work out there at all, and like very hard to find any, especially for somebody who just graduated. But I was very lucky that after a year of doing some teaching up at Cornell, I came back and was able to find a job through another Cornellian, basically in Manhattan. And my first job out of college was renovating Carnegie Hall. And it was for a tiny company of like 4 people. And, basically like out of the 4 of us in the company, like 2 of us knew how to use AutoCAD. So it was just a very kind of getting thrown into the deep end right away. So I stayed with Carnegie until the project was finished for about 3 years. Moved out to Long Island for because my husband was doing his residency out there. And then ended up working out in the Hamptons, doing very different work, kind of high-end, ground-up residential projects for another 3 years out there. And then at that point, when I had to when we knew we wanted to move our life back to Brooklyn, is when I kind of decided to open up my own firm.
I have so many questions about even just that. I know I did stumble upon on your website that you guys did volunteering for Ukraine. So you being from Ukraine now, makes all the sense. Right. What did your firm do with volunteering for Ukraine?
Yeah, we, when the war started, it was really tough for me personally. And one of my employees at the time was also Ukrainian. He was from Odessa, and I'm from Kharkiv, which is right on the border with Russia and is seeing a lot of fighting right now. So, it was just really hard to watch. And we were kind of like, actually, my husband, to his credit, we have 2 small kids. And he was just like, you know what, I think you need to go do something because you're just like losing your mind. So he's like, take everybody, go over there. So we went to the border in Poland with a small volunteer organization. And we're there for a week, just helping people like that were transitioning out of Ukraine and into Poland and just translating for them and helping them carry bags and doing like really basic things to just slightly ease that transition, which was obviously horrible.
Yeah. And hopefully made you feel better since
It did. It was kind of selfish in a way. It made me feel much better. I don't know how, it was a very small drop in the bucket that we helped, but it was something.
Yeah. But having
Yeah.
those connections and seeing issues happen far away that are out of your control and wanting to do something, that it was great you had the opportunity to really go out there and feel a bigger impact than, just donating from afar.
Yeah, exactly. And now that we have that connection, we know the people like there and doing that work. We're also like now trying to see, okay, what's the next step? Like, what else can we do? And, hopefully start to, when the time comes to rebuild, how can we help in that capacity too?
Yeah. Now, big shift back home. What is it? I am not from New York or ever worked in New York. So what is that difference deciding to work in Brooklyn versus Long Island? Is that, like, I find, me being not a New Yorker, not from there, I am always surprised how far away some of those areas are when I do go visit. But how is that different dynamic for anybody that may be looking to start off their career in New York and not know the different areas to work in and how different project types or studios land in certain areas? I don't know if there is anything.
It's very, I think it's very different. Obviously there's certain things that are shared. I'm doing residential work now, and I was doing residential work out on Long Island, but the number of different factors that you have to consider when you're working in the cities or in Brooklyn, Manhattan, Queens, in the 5 boroughs is definitely much more. There's just many more things to consider, because in Long Island, it's kind of like, I think most places in the US, you have an open site and you're not constrained by, landmarks, regulations, subways running down like your street, so you could just pour your foundations and not worry about it. Whereas if you're like in the inner city, you have to really think about what are all the different things that can impact how you design your structure. So I think that those different factors, I think, are really important to get familiar with. And obviously I wasn't familiar with when I started my firm, but like, it's just a growing experience and knowing who to talk to about these things. So like finding a really great expediter. In New York City, we have a whole field called expediting that's like basically devoted to helping architects kind of navigate all of the different regulations.
No, I wouldn't have even thought of that.
Yeah.
But I haven't done work there. I've worked on renovations of a skyscraper and, had highways and parking garages to deal with, but haven't had to deal with the subway and moving while pouring foundations at the same time.
Yeah, because if you're doing borings, to test the soil, you basically, if you're like within 500 feet of a subway, you have to deal with the Department of Transportation. It's a whole thing.
Now, how is working on Carnegie Hall, since I know you do more residential work? So how was starting off your career with that project?
Yeah, it was definitely a huge challenge because I just graduated, and it was such a high profile project. It was featured in the New York Times. There was like all these like the stories about it, and all these difficulties with it as well. And it was already like, it was in phases. So parts of it were under construction, parts of it were still like wrapping up construction documents. So I was kind of really thrown into all of that. And it was great. It was like starting with like the hardest thing, because like the wall section pages, there was like 10 of wall section pages, like of wall types, whereas like in a residential project it's so much simpler. So it really kind of exposed me to like all of the complexities that you can possibly have, like with the acoustics and all of that, acoustic isolation. And there were just like a million things to consider. So that was like really fascinating. And I was like, the project manager, Anne at the time, was like incredibly knowledgeable and like willing to share a lot of information with me and really kind of mentor me there. So that was super helpful. And I think we also did the interior design for that project. So we picked out all of the furniture and like the task chairs, and we tried them all out. And so it was kind of like, other than just like, yes, it's a totally different typology, but the way you approach the project and like, like the design process, I think I really learned a lot from.
Yeah. And how did how did you decide to transition to residential? Was it just availability of jobs over in Long Island, or did you start to want to drive that direction?
So my husband matched to a residency program in the middle of Long Island, which is like kind of a desert in terms of architecture. And I was like, oh boy, okay. So like I still commuted into the city for a year from there, but it was, over 2 hours each way to commute, and it was really tough. And so I ended up trying to find work out there. And like some of the most interesting like modern architecture that's going on right now is in the Hamptons. And so I kind of looked around for some opportunities there, and was able to find a really great office to work for. So it was kind of by chance, really. I mean, I was always interested in like a smaller scale of architecture, I think. But then I kind of got thrown into it, and I really loved it. It was cool how you can really do the whole, because it's so small scale, relatively, you can take it from the beginning to the end, basically on your own. I mean, obviously with consultants and all that, but like you don't need such a big apparatus to create something, and you can really, it's tangible. It's kind of fun.
Yeah. And so your whole career sounds like it's been in smaller firms, and you even own a small firm now. Do you have any advice for someone starting their career in a small firm?
Yeah, I guess a small firm or not, any firm really, you should try to take on as many different types of responsibilities as you can, especially if you plan on opening your own business. You end up doing all the things, so like if you're in a big firm, I think sometimes you can get like pigeonholed into doing one type of work. Whereas in a small firm, like you just end up doing everything. So, whether that's going to the site or sketching through schematic design ideas or selecting materials or looking for precedent images, like you just kind of you have your hand in all the little things. So I think, you should advocate for yourself if you're in a small firm, and show that you can be proficient at doing all of the things, because that'll help you kind of get a broader knowledge base, which I think is what architects need. Is, we're kind of more generalists than specialists, in my opinion.
Yeah, because I always find whenever I was at smaller firms, I tended to wear more hats, and you get to kind of see behind the curtain more than in a larger firm. All depends on own personal experience with it. If you're sitting next to a principal of a large firm all day, every day, you're probably going to hear a lot more than sitting around with your teams. But
I mean, so when I was working in the Hamptons, actually, my boss was really generous with with the way he shared information with us. So we were able to he would like sit us down and be like, okay, like here's like a diagram of how we get our clients. Like here's who like this client came from. Here's who this client came from. And he would just really like kind of pull back the curtain of a lot of the marketing like strategies, and a lot of just like in general, like how the company works. And so I think that that's been really valuable. And I know that not all, principals do that, but I think it's really important to try to understand like how the actual business functions, because obviously now I'm dealing with it personally, and I'm trying to be as open with my employees about that as possible.
Yeah. Did they show you anything on like the financial side of the firm and like how to run the business, or was it more that BD networking to build those relationships?
Not as much. He did share contracts with us, so that was helpful. To get a sense of like, because I think when people are working on a project, understanding like what the relationship with the client is, like what our responsibilities to the client are, and also like what are we billing for it. Like it's just helpful to know when you're doing the work, like, okay, should I do this extra iteration, or is this really not in the budget? And like, I think in a small firm where you don't have like, somebody who oversees that and like dictates that, it's important for the actual person doing the work to understand it. So yeah, so it was kind of a mix. Like he didn't exactly like break down office costs and all the expenses were.
Yeah, not a complete open door.
No,
more than I've seen others.
Yeah.
So now transitioning to open up your own firm, I believe I read it was in 2016 that you decided to do that. How was that transition time? Because it sounded like it was more when you moved back to Brooklyn. Why did you decide to start your own rather than looking for a position at that time?
Yeah. So we had learned, my husband had learned that he matched with a fellowship in Brooklyn, which we were really excited about because we wanted to come back anyway. And so I knew like it was almost a year before I left my company in the Hamptons that I was going to be moving back to Brooklyn. So I had some time to kind of mentally prepare and prepare in general. And basically I told my boss at that time, like, in a year I'll be leaving and I want to start my own firm. I think I always kind of wanted to, was something, an aspiration of mine, but I also feel like, we were ready to start a family and I wanted some flexibility, and my husband's schedule is really rigid. He's a doctor. So it was like, one of us has to have some kind of give. And so I thought, okay, like, let me try to do some side projects and get something off the ground. Worst case scenario, like it doesn't work out and it's a total flop and I'll just get a job. But that was...
So you're doing the side projects prior,
and I did talk to him and he said, yes, that's absolutely fine. You could do your moonlighting as a way to, and he actually gave me a client, which was really nice. That actually ended up leading to my biggest first project that I ended up doing, a house in the Hamptons. So it was, it was kind of like a slow start. So I was able to continue to work while I set up like the PLLC and like the logo and all the things, the website, which didn't have anything on it, but it's just like little by little. Like
baby steps.
Yeah.
Started.
Exactly. So that was the process, and then we moved to the city, and I pretty quickly got my first big job, which was really exciting. But also at the same time got pregnant with my daughter, so it was like a really crazy time when I was like doing this very stressful big project and also trying to navigate, new parenthood.
Yeah. Because at that point the clock's ticking and then it's like two different schedules running.
It is. Yeah. But and that's the downside too of the business, is when it's also your first baby in a way. So, when my daughter was born, I was like basically meeting with clients 2 weeks later with her like newborn next to me.
Yeah. Don't mind her. It's fine.
Yeah, exactly.
So what was the first big project you got?
Right. So it was this couple whose apartment I ended up renovating in Manhattan when I was out in the Hamptons. They decided to build a house in the Hamptons, and that was kind of really exciting for me. It's just like ground up house, very high end, very beautiful. The clients had great taste. We had a very good working relationship at the time. Yeah.
Yeah. So what types of projects do you work on within your firm?
So we're still doing mostly residential. We've done a few more commercial projects. We did a bar up in East Harlem. We did a dental office in Arizona, and we're doing, hopefully starting soon, a restaurant and also in East Harlem for the same client. But I would say the rest of it, mostly like 90% of our work is residential. And it's, everything from apartment renovations and combinations to brownstones. And then we also do additions. Not a ton of ground up work in the tri-state area. I am very lucky. My husband and I are building our own house right now in Brooklyn. And that is ground up. So that's pretty rare, but we were able to find a site with a falling apart little house that we tore down. But so I'd say it's all residential. It's really personal. It's a lot of working with, families and couples, and really trying to understand how they live and how we can make it better. And then recently, so in 2019, I pursued a passive house certification. Just, kind of looking around and seeing where the codes are going and where what is the best practice for construction these days. I learned about passive house, I did the training, and now we're applying it to all of our, any project that has any facade work. We're applying passive house principles, which is like really important to me.
Yeah. And I guess when I've looked at passive house, I'm not passive house certified. I more see it as starting fresh with a new build. Is there a way to do passive house strategies in New York City with apartments? For sure. Not apartments so much, but brownstones and like row houses for sure. Apartments too, to be honest. I think I have seen that done. We haven't quite done that, but with brownstones, you can definitely do that. And it's just a question of treating the existing brick, applying the insulation, putting the really good windows, getting the
mechanical ventilation system going. So, and Passive House actually has an ENERFIT certification, which is specifically for retrofits. So yeah, so it's great because it's really just a much better way that you can like lower your carbon footprints by like not knocking things down, even though we knocked our building down. We had no choice. We had no choice. But like, so, it was like fully termite eaten and water damaged. There was nothing to save. But whenever we can, we try to save the structures as much as we can, and then apply these Passive House principles to make it last, that much longer and make it more efficient.
Yeah. So what are you doing for your house?
So it's gonna be our first certified Passive House. So I'm very excited about that. And where it's ground up. It's just CMU. We're trying to use really standard building techniques so as to keep the budget down. CMU with exterior continuous insulation, and exterior continuous air barrier, mechanical ventilation. It's the ERV Zender system, triple pane windows, all the things. So we're really excited. It's getting close.
Yeah. So how far along is it?
Very far. I'm very excited. So I think it's been quite a journey, but I think a few more months.
You're so close.
So close. You can see the end of the tunnel. Yeah.
Yeah. I know I did my friend's house down in South Carolina and got to visit them probably a year or so after they moved in because they're not local to me. And it was so weird sleeping in my own project. Like I couldn't fall asleep. I was lying there like, oh my gosh, I designed this. I typically do a lot of commercial construction, so you don't sleep in a commercial project. You get to walk through it and experience it. But
that's so true.
It's very different.
Yeah, I don't think I've slept in any of my projects either, but I did have a drink in one of my projects, which was very fun.
Yeah. So you'll have to keep me posted when you move.
Yeah, it's very surreal. We'll see.
Yeah. And do you have any advice for anyone looking to start their own firm? I know you moonlighted going into it, but shifting back to the city.
Definitely. So for me, a huge like help was this mentor this woman, Carol Gretter, who I had a friendship with from working at a different firm. And she had her own firm, but she was like, 10 years older than me and 10 years more experienced than me. And basically we ended up sharing a space. She was subletting from a bigger architecture firm. I was subletting from her. It was like a Russian dolls, like for firm
situation. 3 architecture firms in one spot.
And but it was great because we all had like access to a conference room and to a materials library, and also to each other's employees. So we were able to throw ideas at each other, and it was really great. And whenever I didn't have enough work, I was able to kind of do some side work for her. So having that kind of like flexibility, and it was like belt and suspenders, because if you didn't have a project, you never really know when the next one's going to come. It was just great to have. She always needed extra work, so I was like, okay, I could always pick up a few hours here and there if I need it. So that was a huge help. And just in general, as a mentor, she was just like wonderful and continues to be. I'm having dinner with her next week. So we're staying very close. So that's one thing I would say, like try to find somebody that you can like learn from, but also maybe have like some, what's the word? Like relationship where you can help each other, whatever the term for that would be. Mm-hmm. So that's one. And then, talking to people, like networking. It sounds like everybody says the same thing, networking, but like you have to like meet the right consultants, the right contractors, other architects. So I joined the AIA CRAN group, which is like the local custom residential architecture network group. Through that group, there's just so much, so many people that are willing to help you with detailing, with like finding consultants, with how to deal with contracts, really great. So like peer groups are good. I've joined a few networking groups to just like meet other professionals in the field. Because you never know, again, like in our job, like where is the next project coming from? It's a little bit of an unknown. So you have to try to optimize the potential for that. Like, so just by meeting people, I find it's really important.
Yeah. And really working on building a community around your firm, because I never really thought of making sure you could be a contract employee to another small firm. So if something flexes, you guys can help each other
Yeah.
out along the way, and not thinking, it's all on you to find all the work as you're starting to build the
Right.
company, but leverage others
Yeah.
and talk and help. Like we don't know everything. So finding that support group to go ask questions as you come across different
For
situations
sure. And I remember
is
when I was starting,
important.
I was like, okay, I don't know everything. I think I know nothing. I'm like, I mean, I know some things like foundational things, but I'm like, okay, I'm going into this and there's going to be like situations where I really don't know. And just
Mhm.
finding, like saying, okay, but I do know who to ask. Like I have like this person and this person that can point me in the right direction. And that was really helpful. And like just asking all the questions is the way to go. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know you have an employee, and I know that can be very hard for somebody starting their own firm to when to know to hire and bring on somebody. And it can just be scary to then have to be in charge
Yeah.
of making sure, they take home food for their families. What was that experience like, deciding it's time to hire
Yeah.
somebody else?
So I hired Jack in 2018. And I hired him as a part-time employee. I think he was working like half-time in the beginning. I was just really busy. I had a big project in Brooklyn and I needed help. And he had graduated from grad school. So he was already like pretty knowledgeable, hadn't quite done residential work, but was like really open to learning and just like pretty great. And so we developed a relationship and started working together. And then I think about after a year, I hired him full time because it was going well and it just seemed like the right thing to do, and he wanted it, he wanted to do the work. Um, and then of course COVID hit and it was like very scary because all of our projects stopped. And I was pregnant with my son at that point, and I was like, oh my God, if like I can't keep Jack on board, I'm gonna like have Luca, my son, and then it's gonna be like a disaster when all those projects come flooding back. So we were able to get the funding from the government to help pay his salary, which was like a huge help and relief. And yeah, but to your point, it's so stressful because like there were definitely months where I was paying him more than I was paying myself just to kind of keep him on board. And that's just part of it, and I'm very lucky that like in the beginning of my firm, I was kind of able to support my husband and I more because he was in school. And then now that he's actually getting a full-time salary, he kind of supports. So it goes back and forth. So like that's, yeah, but to your point, it's definitely stressful sometimes, but also it's such a relief to know, to have somebody that like, you can trust and just really kind of, it's been wonderful. Yeah. We do have another employee that we work with kind of more part-time, like more as a contractor, that she does more like interiors work for us. But yeah, with Jack, it's been a really great journey so far.
Yeah. Now, when he was part-time, was he more on that contract level
Yeah.
with that? So it was kind of that baby
It was a
step
baby
in.
step. Exactly. So it was like a 1099. I was paying him hourly and kind of like trying to gauge how much work I needed and how much work I can afford to pay him for. And then as we kind of grew a little bit, it became more comfortable. Like last year was like a really tough year. So we actually, at the biggest, my firm had 4 full-time people. And last year was really slow, 2023. And it was actually like a pretty stressful time because I did have to let go like one intern and a full-time architect, which was like very stressful, but you could cut part of the business, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. How was that like, letting somebody
Horrible.
go?
Especially when like it's so full disclosure, this is a close friend that I ended up working with after COVID because she was let go from her company during COVID and ended up working for me. And like, we're still very close friends. So it was like also a lesson of like, maybe you shouldn't hire your close friends because it's really stressful if you have to let them go and make those kind of hard decisions. But yeah, lesson learned. And also just like, I think going forward, I'm going to be more careful about like jumping into hiring somebody full time, just because it does put such an onus on you to like you said, pay them enough money to feed their families. And I want that salary to be like a reasonable salary, like, and I want them to feel valued. So yeah, it's a balancing act.
Yeah. How many projects are you typically running at the
So
same time?
We usually have around 2 big ones and then a handful of like smaller ones. And then that's another thing, like, if it's kind of a slow time of the year or something is, or one of our projects is wrapping up, but we didn't sign on a new big one yet, we'll kind of take on more like filing projects or like smaller things that, we don't usually do like just like a kitchen renovation anymore. But if there's like a quiet time, then those are always kind of coming through. So I'm finding that like there's ways to fill the time if we don't have anything big going on. So kind of getting a little bit better at that.
Yeah. And keeping that scale, because I know a lot of the people I know starting out, they're in like the really small kitchen reno decks, those tiny projects, and building up to bigger scale projects. But always knowing you can still do that to help fill in funds and fill in time is important. You don't have to give it up.
It's tricky because like in New York, sometimes like doing a kitchen is actually like it loses us money because the amount of time that goes into doing that work is actually, sometimes more labor intensive or time intensive than the value that it makes sense for the customer to pay you for doing that work, if you know what I mean. So like actually what it ends up being mostly is like filing projects, because in New York City, and this is the beauty of being a licensed architect in New York, like any condo or co-op board requires their shareholders to hire an architect to file a set of drawings for any renovation. So it's kind of like, it's like built in, work assurance, because even though these projects are not necessarily always exciting design projects, like you're always going to have filing jobs or jobs where you have to like get something through the condo board for approval. So they'll, so we do end up taking that sometimes when there's some free time in our schedule.
Now for those ones, do you have to be the architect doing the work, or are you just kind of that middle person between another architect doing work and connecting it?
So it works. Basically, we'll go in, we'll do the design for them, like the layout. Usually those clients don't hire us to do like design development. So we'll just do a schematic design, do the layout, kind of make sure everything is working, the bathrooms are in the right place. And we put together like a really simple drawing set for the board, for board's approval. So like a demo plan, construction plan, some waterproofing details. And that's usually enough for them to kind of say yay or nay, and then we kind of go through like a process of answering questions and clarifications. And then we'll file that with the DOB, and that'll be the end of our services typically for that kind of job. So, that's kind of like we're kind of figured that out already. And it's a good way to fill in some of that time when we're not like actually doing active design.
Yeah. And then I want to shift over to a different part of your story that you mentioned. And it was that you started your own firm because you also wanted to start having a family. So how has that, I guess I'll focus more when you had your daughter, because now you have 2. So how was that when she finally came and still getting the firm up and running? How did that work?
It was stressful and it was a complete blur, because when you're a new parent, you're not getting any sleep. So it's actually in a way kind of similar to architecture school, I guess, from like a mental health perspective. But no, it was a lot. We're very lucky that both my parents and my in-laws live not too far from us. So my mother-in-law was with us, in the first few months. When someone was a baby. So I did have a lot of help, which was huge, and remains like a huge, like, something that helps me every day, because, when I have a meeting or I can't pick them up or something, sometimes my in-laws or my parents are able to help out with that. And that's everything. But yeah, I mean, that's the trade-off, right? When you're working for a big corporate firm, you get your 4 weeks. I don't even know what the allowance now is for maternity leave. But when you have your own company, there is no maternity leave. Like you just keep working. I was working till the day before I gave birth, and like, the next week, as soon as I got home, I started again. So that part of it is different, and it's hard. But I don't know. I think because it's your company and it's your projects and you're so invested in their success, it doesn't feel like a slog. You want to do it. And I did find that it gave me a lot of value. Like, I feel like a lot of new moms feel a little bit isolated, and you're kind of like at home with the baby and you don't have a lot of connection to the world. But when you're forced to have connection to the world, I don't know, for me it was good, I think.
Yeah. Were you able to have that flexibility as you got back into it that you thought you would have?
For sure. I was able to work from home. I was working from home because I didn't have an office at the time. It was just me at home.
Mm-hmm.
And even now, like, I can choose to do what I need to do. Like, if I need to wake up a little bit earlier and work, I could do that. If I have to stay later after the kids are in bed, I can work. But also I can leave at 4:00 to pick them up and not worry that I'm going to miss the school bus or whatever, So it's just like, I still have that flexibility is huge for me. And, I just remember kind of being worried about it when I was working for my previous firm, thinking like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to ask my like male boss for permission to go see like my doctor every other week or something. It's going to be so stressful. And so I was kind of happy to have avoided that.
Yeah. Were you still working 40 hours if you're even tracking your time, or were you kind of just whatever?
Yeah, I track my time now semi regularly, but
you don't have the accounting emails coming at you.
No, I periodically, like when billing to come time, I bill at the end of every month, and I'm like, like I Slack Jack and Julia and be like, hey guys, like, did you guys log your time? But it's really just for our own information. Most of our projects we don't do on a time, like on an hourly basis, so it's not as important. It's just for us to know like how much time did it really take us to do schematic design on this type of project. But yeah, it's hard to give you like an actual answer to that because it varies so much. Yeah. Like the commitment.
And how was it having the second child? Because then you had some other help with the firm. Was that a different dynamic for you? Did you find you were less stressed because you could lean?
Yeah, definitely less stressed. Less stressed because my firm was already more established. I didn't have to be like reinventing the wheel every time. Now we have kind of like a base to work from. I had Jack, he was here. Basically, like I took off a few weeks after Luca was born, and he just fully ran the firm, and I was not worried about it at all. And yeah, so that was a huge change. And also when you have a second baby, you know what to expect. So you're not like, as much of a deer in the headlights. Yeah, what is happening? Yeah. So,
yeah. Do you have any advice for firm owners balancing their workload and time with the family?
I mean, it's so personal. It's hard to give like specific advice. I think for me, both are so important. Like, it's really important for me to obviously spend time with my kids and my husband, but also like it gives me a lot of value to do what I'm doing with my work. So I just, finding that balance is important, but I do think it's a very personal thing, like to know what to do. But yeah, community, if I think to be successful and having that ability to do that work, you have to have community, like family or friends or somebody that can help with childcare. And right now, like we like in our like neighborhood in Brooklyn where we live, this happens all the time. Like I'm running late from a meeting, or my husband is running late, and like I have to like text my neighbor and be like, hey, can you grab Simone from the bus? Like it still happens. It happened like last week. And so having like even, community of just neighbors is really important. So that all adds to it.
Yeah. And to not feel so isolated with it. Like, you can reach out to others to help, just like reaching out to a network of people to figure out details or instances you haven't dealt before.
Yeah.
So
networking on every front. On every front. Yeah. With your neighbors. Yeah. Exactly.
And I know I always like to close with this final question, and it's, what advice do you have for young professionals just starting their career?
Yeah, I guess it's similar to my advice about starting your own firm, is really just trying to get your hands into all the different aspects of the job and understand what resonates with you, because like it could be design, it could be like the technical side, it could be, making images, beautiful images. Like there's like so many aspects to what we do. Maybe it's marketing, maybe it's networking, like just because you're good at design doesn't mean that you are good at making those connections and bringing in work. So it's really trying to figure out what aspect of the job resonates with you. And if you feel like, for me, I felt like I was like mediocre enough in everything that it kind of came together to do what I'm doing. And it kind of worked. I don't know how, but it seems to be working. So I think, just like really trying it all out and seeing what fits. And just talking to as many people as you can and asking questions, I think, is the basis for everything.
Yeah. Have you found as starting your own firm that you found any of those mediocre things as a bigger strength?
I think I surprised myself with the networking aspect and like talking to people. I was always very, very shy and like introverted and still am. And part of my stress of working for a bigger firm was like having to present in front of my boss and like, in front of clients. But like when I started my firm, I don't know what it is, but like I was more confident in my ideas, maybe because, I had ownership over them. And so like I got pretty good at talking to clients and talking to contractors. Frequently I'll walk into a site and I'll be like the only woman in the whole site. And there's a bunch of contractors who have worked 30 years longer than me. And, but you still have to like find the common language with them and make them respect your ideas. So like that took a lot of like training and experience. And then, and same with just talking to other professionals and like really making those connections. I think networking and getting to know people is like a skill that you have to practice. And so I did think that I found out that I'm better at it than I thought I was, which is good. And then certain things I ended up kind of passing on to other people who are better at them than I am, such as, rendering or even doing some of the technical detailing. I still am fascinated by it and am involved, but you have to kind of like prioritize certain aspects of the work when you're running a firm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it's also important that when you started, you felt just mediocre in most things. Like you didn't have that. Didn't sound like you had that confidence of, oh yeah, I am the best detailer, I'm the best renderer, I can do all this stuff. It's nope, let's
yeah, my husband makes fun of me because he's kind of an overthinker. Like he like always has to analyze all the pros and cons and like really thinks about things deeply before making decisions. And I'm always like, let's just do it. Like let's see what happens. Like
worst thing to happen is it doesn't
all
work
our savings and
you can go find somebody to hire you.
Yeah. No, I mean, truly, I think having a little bit of that like ability to jump into things and take a little bit of a risk. I do think that that's kind of important when you're starting your own firm because as soon as you start to overthink things, you kind of get stuck. And so, you kind of have to roll with it. Like, okay, I got this job. I didn't get this job. Not the end of the world. There'll be the next one, so like you kind of have to keep going and not get too precious about certain things because it can definitely drive you crazy.
Yeah, and not get hung up if you don't get selected for a project. And same thing in any firm size. Like it's nothing.
It's not.
Personal.
And then, so one other thing is we didn't even talk about this, but like putting together proposals and like, cost estimates. Like it's always so hard to know like what you're worth, and so you ask around and you try to get comparable ideas from other architects. And then there always comes a time when you're like, okay, I'm just going to try to push this. And I think this is what I'm worth and this is what I'm going to put. And then you get rejected and you're like, okay, well, let's think about this again next time and either try it again because maybe the person rejected you and they just didn't really understand what your value was, or maybe you are really overcharging. So you have to kind of like keep trying to understand, what that is. So there's a lot of aspects to it, but that's what I think is so fun about having your own firm is that there's like so many things to think about that are kind of unrelated to each other.
Yeah, beyond just being an employee and all the little tiny facets that, be a part of it. And so if there's anybody looking for advice or interested in your firm or just want to hear more from you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
I think our website has all our contact details, but I would say Instagram is probably the place where we try to post weekly. It's another aspect of the firm that actually I don't have any strength in, which is social media marketing. But we are really trying, and I think we're getting across some of our projects and some of our work. So I think that would be the most up-to-date stuff to check up on. But I'm always happy to talk to anybody. So they can email me and get in touch.
Yeah, and I'll leave your website and your
Awesome.
Instagram handle down below in the show notes. So it makes it a lot easier just to find you and find out more about your work. Yeah, but thanks, Jenny, for taking the time to speak with me in your busy schedule of running a firm, family, and everything else going on.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Again.
I hope you enjoyed our discussion today. Learn some advice to take with you and see how our industry is all tied together to create the world around us. Check out the description below for any links or resources we discussed. If you liked the episode, please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. Give me a thumbs up and leave a comment below. It really helps others be able to discover this resource and support finding that career path that best works for them. If you know someone that has inspired your own career that you'd like me to interview, let me know in the comments below, or you can reach out to me via my website or LinkedIn. I'd be happy to share their story or your own. Thank you again, and I cannot wait for the next career story I get to share with you next week.